for her to start. There we go. Okay. Three, two, and one. Hey, Dave Melenda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you this week. Got a great question for you. But before I share the question, let's work with me here for a second. If you own a business, there's three primary chunks to your business. There is the product or service that you supply. There is a customer that you supply it to, and then there's generally a team that supplies it to the customer. Our focus today is going to be on your team. It's so often that we skip that. We focus on the customer, we focus on the product, and somehow the team just gets left behind. So the question is for you is your team living up to its full potential? If not, I want to encourage you to strap in here for the next 40 minutes or so. We are hanging out with John Taylor McEntire. How are you, my friend?
Doing great. Awesome morning to be alive.
Absolutely. And you are the founder and chief empowerment officer at a company called Mutual Prosperity LLC. So why don't you fill us in on what Mutual Prosperity is?
Well, I grew up with lots of different culture around me and everything, and I traveled a lot when I was younger, and even today. But I realized that we're not just ourselves. We're not just our the people that we hang around with. We're the world. We're a piece of the puzzle, and so everybody has a piece of that puzzle, and somehow we as leaders need to be able to allow margin around that piece so that people can actually grow into their piece and feel like they're part of the process. And so mutual prosperity is meant to actually be team building. It's actually to have people feel buy-in for what activities they're doing. There's too much stuff going on in the corporate world where people kind of feel like they're in a box and they're not actually able to do things, they're not enabled and everything. And mutual prosperity is actually to widen that and help leaders actually be what they need to be to get that buy-in from their team.
That's awesome. So do you come into companies and help them with the team building, help them with that expansion? Where do you fit into that model for somebody listening as we unpack this today? I'm just curious how that looks.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I typically work with the entrepreneur, the founder of the organization first, and then go through and work out, what are the issues. Everything's tailor-made, and basically understand, what is it their team's not buying into, what is it that they're struggling with, what's keeping them up at 3 o'clock in the morning, what's making it so that they can't be with their families as much as they want to. Somehow we need to get that buy-in so that they can feel like they can leave activities to their team so that their team can take some of that work off their shoulders and they can feel enabled to, live their lives to the fullest.
And I'm just curious as we start this thing, John, because if we kind of back the truck up into the 70s and maybe early into the 80s, we had this discussion about like there's a boss and then there's, the employee, the employer employee. And there seemed to be a lot of like angst there. There seemed to be a lot of, I remember when my dad was growing or when I was growing up and my dad was in the workforce when he was alive, he was in a situation where it felt like it was he positioned it where it was like him against the boss. And I don't see that as much, but in your travels, are you still seeing that, or is that kind of gone by the wayside where that old-fashioned thought of, I'm the boss and you got to do what I say? Is that still hanging around?
I think it's a still there to somewhat even in the United States, but I worked in Japan, I worked in Taiwan, I worked in Doha, Qatar, and definitely, at the different times that I was in those different places, there was still some of that hierarchy going on. Doha itself was very interesting because, first of all, I worked with people from 60 different countries, and then you've got your royal family that runs the Qatar Foundation, and then you have the regular Qataris. And then you have a hierarchy of people along the way that come from around the world, and
Sure.
there's the Americans and then the British and the Germans and the Japanese and you get all these people filtered in from Canada and Europe and then get into the more developing worlds and so everybody's kind of placed in their own little category. So there was a lot of that in that situation. When I was in Japan in from 89 to 94, there was still a lot of that there too because there was still the quote unquote lifetime employment aspect that was going on. So people felt
Yeah,
really married to their jobs. And there's a lot of what's called zangyo, which is immense amount of overtime. And so people were really living for their jobs. And it was usually the man of the house that was doing that. And then they were stressed out, which meant their wife was stressed out because they were handling everything with the family. And
fair.
uh, and so there was some of that. Now, I think that because of COVID everywhere, that a lot of that is dissipated. And we do see that, and it's a really astounding number, but 86 to 87% of the population in the workforce in the United States is actually looking for another job. And that for any leader should be something that should be worrisome. So
Yeah,
I think that part of the problem is that we have these situations called, with HR, and I think the questions that HR puts out are just really they're just too tertiary. They're too basic. They're not really getting into what the people are. They're asking about what's their degree, what's their certifications, what jobs did they do? Were they at their job too long? Were their job too little? What
fair.
made them leave? But they're not really getting into, where does this person come from? What do they do? What lights them up? What makes them really, tick at their best? What is the opposite of that? What makes them, want to kind of cower and actually do the quiet quitting or the quick quitting and
Yeah.
just sit things out until they get their new job. And that's just a disaster waiting to happen.
Well, and I don't want to breeze by that because that's a shocking statistic where 86 to 87% of people are looking for a job. So I want to kind of look at that for a second because for somebody listening, let's just say you have a team of 10 people. And I always think, you can make these numbers look however you want. So I always be like, let's just cut the thing in half just for fun. Let's just say half of our team instead of 9 out of 10 of the people. Let's just say half of our team is actively or, quietly looking for a job, whatever you want to call that. I mean, the amount of money that is about to cost you or is currently costing you as an entrepreneur is way above what you ever could think. We have this thought in our mind that it's going to be a couple of dollars to put an ad in when they leave, and we're going to spend an hour or two with a resume. So, it's going to cost me like $1,000 to do this. There's these people, John, that have that thought. What's your research shown on what it is like? What is a good number for people, to think about what the average cost is to replace somebody? Because I don't think until we understand the depth and the severity, it's like people don't care. Our building or our company or our department is a revolving door. We don't really care. They're always in, they're always out. But boy, there's got to be a huge financial implication to that. And I'm just curious what your research has shown on that.
So before we get into that, just when we're talking about like a startup company, somebody who's in the tech field, who's
Yep,
put their together, you've got your first, three or four people who are really kind of glued together, and they're all bought in because they're all founders. Sometimes somebody peters off and everything, because of relationship issues or something else going on in their life, but
sure.
it's that team is really working really well. Now, when they start bringing in new people and you do get to the 10 range, that's when things start to go haywire because all of a sudden, what you thought was your mission and your vision, and you were clear with those three or four people, all of a sudden, people are starting to not understand that anymore. So I think the costs are, for trying to recruit somebody, you're
Yeah.
being 20 to $50,000 right there. And then when you're thinking about training and the cost of training, and it takes somebody at least 6 months to actually really get up to speed. And
Yeah.
so you have to count their salary right there. And then if that person leaves because of whatever reason, they didn't feel comfortable or they didn't feel like they were a good fit or something happened, then you've lost that, but then you're having to actually replace that. And and then you're missing, you have that hole of not having that activity being taken care of the way that it needs
Yeah.
to. Others are trying to fill in. And so then you've got, you're in the hundreds of thousands of dollars for somebody who's maybe making around $80,000.
Yeah.
Um, it's astounding how much that can be, how devastating that can be.
Yeah, absolutely. And you don't need that money right there. I mean, you're talking 20 to 50, for the replacement and then 50 roughly, to for on $100,000 person, half the year is spent on just getting them up to speed. So like you said, you're into this for 100 grand, let's just say in that range. And the reality is the other point you brought up is that lost opportunity, John. We haven't even identified that as how much work didn't get done or how many opportunities didn't get successfully navigated because this person was not up and running. And I wanted to unpack that for the listener because I get people a lot of times, like I said, that don't see that this is a big deal. I hear this fire quick thing. I hear, hire quick, fire quick. I hear these things and it doesn't really make sense for the average person to be on a team because, I mean, if you're always like looking over your shoulder, wondering if you're next, how effective can you really be? And so back to our original question, is your team living up to its potential? How do you look at a team based on your experience and again from all over the planet? How do what are some things that healthy teams, what are some environments that healthy teams do well in? Have you found any patterns in your research?
Well, so what I think is interesting, you have to think of team members as puzzle pieces, okay, or as gears in a machine. And when that puzzle piece fits well, then other people actually know how they fit with that puzzle piece and how things can run together. When those gears actually start moving after that, 4 to 6 months initial stuff, then
Yeah,
things start really taking off. And if you don't ever get those puzzle pieces to fit, or people don't feel like their puzzle piece has been allowed to fit, and again, I really want to caution people that it's not just giving them a piece of the puzzle and giving them just that space. You need to give them some margin because everybody, I really believe that everybody's here on this earth for a purpose. And the
hmm,
problem is that most people don't find out what their purpose is because of our education system, because of the geopolitical system, because of all these different things that are going on. And,
sure.
media doesn't help very much in that. Social media takes people's attention away. You know, there needs to be some way of helping people understand that as they're going into that piece of the puzzle, they're going to be enabled to actually utilize the skills that they bring to the table, which is their intellect, it's their creativity, it's their ability to move with other people. One other aspect that we haven't brought in here is that we
Yeah,
have more generations in the workforce now, like never before. And so each one of these generations is thinking differently, and they're thinking the other generation doesn't know how to work. And the fact of the matter is, everybody has different motivations because of the environment that they grew up in, and somehow
yeah,
we need to get that piece together so that everybody can feel that if you're an older person and more experienced, then you should be feeling like you should be a mentor to those underneath you to help them, guide them in that way. We need to have leaders that actually pull that out of those people. And then we need to have the younger people recognize that there are people who do know a bit more than they do just because they've been in the workforce and then want to learn from them. So it's a whole bunch of different things together,
sure. Yeah.
all related to culture.
And I think that that culture word is so unique because I ask, you know, business owners and presidents and people from around the country, I asked them what type of culture do they have, and some people are like, we don't believe in culture. Some people are like, our culture is awesome. And then you talk to the team and it's not, so at Mutual Prosperity, do you work a lot with culture and trying to help people identify and understand what their culture is?
That's the main goal. You probably were going to ask this earlier, but I think I'll get into it now. I have a system called Sync. It's
Okay.
SYNC, synchronize yourself naturally within your community. And for 35 years, I've worked mostly for other organizations, large organizations, very well-known organizations, and I've had to actually, build teams in regards to I handle technology transfer. And for those people who don't know what technology transfer is, that's when in major research universities, in national laboratories, in large companies where they have lots of research going on, there happens to be lots of funding that comes from the federal governments around the world, and that money needs to be generating something that's actually beneficial for the public. And so the tech transfer office, their goal is to actually do triage on those technologies, determine which ones actually are solving a problem that needs to be solved. It's not just something wishing to solve something, but it's not theoretical, but it's actually creating a solution. So, if you look at your smartphone, many of the aspects that came on the smartphone, GPS, your touch screen, all the data components, the voice activated systems, Siri, all those things came from technology transfer. And when it comes to like the medical world, biotech, a lot of the drugs that are coming out, a lot of the devices that are coming out are coming from these organizations. And so the technology transfer um, uh, officer, the people who are handling that, they need to understand the business side of things, they need to understand the technical side of things, and they need to understand the legal side of things because they're protecting the intellectual property with patents and copyrights, trade secrets, and
Sure.
such. And
Oh,
then they need to be able to understand who are the players out there that could actually take that technology. And so that ends up being sometimes existing companies, but oftentimes it ends up being some entrepreneurs who say, hey, I want to take this technology and move it forward. And that tends to actually go better because the larger companies think it's too risky for things that are just off the shelf. And so
sure.
I've hundreds of technology, licensing activities that go to startups. And so I've helped those startups not only get the technology, but actually help them along the way in different ways and actually getting funding and those types of things. So that growth cycle is really important. But the technology transfer office happens to be an appendage to the university, which is based on education. And so people don't always correlate. Even the top people in the organization don't always correlate that those educational results, the optimal part of that is actually having something that's beneficial for the public. That's where these products and services are
Sure.
actually becoming that. So as somebody who's led these organizations, you're always asking for money from the accounting department and from, getting people in the president's office to buy into that because you have to pay for that expensive intellectual property. You've got to do triage in regards to, what the fit is. How do I make a demonstration or a prototype model? Those are expensive. And then how do I market that? And then how do I make sure the people that I'm marketing it to are the people who should be taking it on? So there's lots of money that needs to come there. So I coined myself as an innovation ecosystem enabler. I'm enabling that ecosystem around that technology transfer office, around the technology, around the researchers, around the whole organization, trying to pull those resources together and get people to speak the same language. So
Oh,
one of the things so synchronize, what that has to do is really helping people break the curse of Babel. And what I believe is that every company, every organization has a Tower of Babel that they need to break down. They need to be able to make sure that the people in accounting understand what the people in HR are thinking, what the people on the factory floor are thinking, what the engineers, what the C-suite, everybody speaks all these different languages. And so
Yeah.
we need to do a language and alignment activity to get everybody understanding what each other does. And there's a number of activities that I do to help people come to that realization. But once you get people understanding that their jargon that they're speaking in their technical world doesn't make sense to those outside of that, which is
Sure.
the majority of the company, um,
Right.
that they need to start doing things in a different way. The next thing is really understanding orbs of influence. And orbs of influence are really your orb is here. And if you report to somebody, then your orb and that person's orb should be touching. And I use orb instead of sphere because orbs are more organic. Orbs are more pliable. Orbs are more, something that you can get a whole bunch of bodies together and start working in the same arena. So early on in my career, I was in Japan in 90 to 94. One of the projects that I had came from a company called Microsoft. And I was a consultant, and my job for Microsoft was just to give a lay of the land. We're in VHS territory right now, so this really dates me, but this is
Most
really
people don't even know what you just said with VHS, John. They're like, what? Wait, what's that now?
but the thing is, it's really important to understand that at the time, Hollywood was not wanting to have their movies on VHS anymore because they were so worried about piracy. So VHS is this tape, this cassette tape, and there were two types. There was VHS and there was Betamax from Sony, and Macrovision, the founder of Macrovision, created a system that went through the video blanking area. And I won't get into the technology, but it sends a signal from one box to another if they're connected by a cord. And it would send this message where the video would be darkened and lightened, the sound would be garbled, it would be warped video, so you
Hmm,
wouldn't get a clean video. And so
gotcha.
so this was the way to get the Hollywood studios to buy into continuing with VHS because DVDs and Blu-rays were not out yet. That was still about 5 years out. And so what I had to do was actually go in and figure out who are those orbs of influence. Well, the first orb of influence was JVC, who was the inventor of VHS. And so I had to work with Hiroto-san, and that's the president. And once we got him bought into understanding what dilemma we had with the studios and that this could solve that, then we went to their parent company, which was Matsushita, that's Panasonic and national brands. And
Right.
then from there, we had to go to, Hitachi, Sanyo, Sharp, um, and other Japanese players, Canon. And then we had to pull in Sony, and this was a big one because they did not want to give up the better technology, the more high quality video, but they ultimately had to because they needed to be in line with what the studios needed. Once we got them done, then we had people from Hong Kong, Orion, and Taiwan, and then also we had the three players in Korea, so Samsung, Daewoo, and Hyundai. And so getting all them together, then we had to go to actually France for Thomson and the Netherlands for Philips. So we built a whole coalition and actually got everybody to sign on the dotted line, and therefore we had a de facto standard. That's what people need to understand the orbs of influence does. You pull people in little by little, and as you get them to buy in to the thing, they see the vision, and the VHS lasted for another, 10, 12 years.
Yeah.
And but you had that kingpin of Hitachi, not Hitachi, but of JVC that was really crucial, and then you got the others from that. So I take that same motive in regards to how we deal with our internal teams, and then you go outside that eternal team. When you're looking at small teams, of course, we may have, virtual assistants. We may have, of course, our suppliers and those vendors that we use. I actually think that we need to actually pull them into a tighter orbit, okay?
Sure.
So they feel like they're part of the same team. So I think leaders should actually be putting them on their board they should be they should be having board meetings with these players on, either a quarterly basis or a monthly basis, just to make sure that everybody's on the same page. And as you
Sure.
do that, then you go into the next level, which is your collaborators, competitors, and your investors, and you need to pull them in. And then once you have all those together, your goal is to actually get out to the client, the customer who's going to be buying things. But if you have everybody aligned, then getting to the client is that much easier, and it's easier to get the investment that comes into that, and all those things. So these orbs of influence are really, really crucial. The
Sure.
one last thing about
Yeah.
synchronize is so I went to Japan at age 19. I was a missionary for my church then, and I just fell in love with Japan for the 2 years that I was there. And so I got immersed in the language and I got immersed in the culture. And so when I went back to university, I decided I wanted to be a consultant that was dealing in Japan. And Japan was just, starting to, wind up to be this big behemoth that it became. And so I went back and studied Japanese as my major with business, and then I had an Asian studies minor with Mandarin and Korean, and
Wow.
um, and so as I was learning about Japan, I actually was more of an artsy type person. I was in theater from age 9 to 19, and so the arts was like my world, and so the technology side of things was really not there. And I had this impression that I needed to take a technol a technical writing class rather than taking freshman English. And so this technical writing class actually changed my view of the world and actually what I would be end up doing. And that technical writing class, where everybody had their class project, an engineer talking about how to put a gizmo together, some chemist talking about a chemical recipe and how that all works together. And here I'm talking about two consensus building concepts from Japan. One was nemawashi, and the other one is ringi seido. And nemawashi, what that is, if you think back um, to the Karate Kid, a lot of people have seen Karate Kid, maybe some people haven't, but you've got Mr. Miyagi, who is, that bonsai master creating those beautiful trees and everything. Well, what
Hmm.
happens to those bonsai masters? They're not just clipping the outside and keeping that small and delicate and everything. They're actually working with the roots. So nemawasu is to is ne is the root, and then mawasu is to dig around the roots. So what happens is that this was a technical way of taking care of gardens. So before you transplanted this plant from one pot to another pot or another plot, you would take dirt soil from the new place, put it in with the old, mix it up, let it, ruminate, and then you would transplant it, and that transplantation would be less traumatic. And so it became a cultural term for Japanese, and it meant that you're preparing the roots, you're preparing the ground for some change to take place. So that's the nemawashi. The ringi seido is something that I really feel passionate about. And you had mentioned how we have this top-down hierarchy of people, making decisions from the top, and I don't think that
Yeah.
works, especially now. And
Sure.
what in Japan is that you'll have your players here and say, like, there's a middle manager right here, and he's dealing with these people underneath him, and these people come up with some like a solution to a problem that happened, and they'll talk to this manager, and then this manager will go ahead and use Nemawashi, talk with these other managers that are talking with other people that have other people that are related to that activity. And so this decision-making process, starts, going around, and they have what's called a Ringi show, and it's a circular activity. So you discuss these things, you finally come up with a solution, everybody's bought in, then it goes up to the CEO, the shacho, is the president, and they put their honko, their stamp on that as approval. So it takes longer than, of course, the US system, but the thing is, everything has been worked out beforehand, and once
Sure.
they have that stamp is done, that they just move full steam ahead. Everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing, and they feel very comfortable doing that. I believe that's the way we need to be working with our four generations and with our multicultural people in our companies.
Wow.
That
There's a ton there. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
that Nemawashi is really important. We need to dig around those roots, especially for those people who are just new in our organizations or just new in the workforce. The more that we can actually work with their roots and get them to understand, this new soil that they're being put into, we can get them to feel like they're bought in. And then
Yeah.
you have that ability for everybody to have a say in the matter. It's important. One other
Yeah.
thing about this is that it's not so much just the decision-making process. I think that when we have um, our visions and our missions, that they need to transform over time as our organizations grow. Of course, the vision and the mission needs to grow with it. It's not something that should be top down. This is something where people need to feel involved. And I'm not saying to let everybody have a say in what it should be doing and to take a lot of time with that. I think what people need to see is that the vision from the visionary, the top, and then have people kind of give ideas in regards to how you actually cement that and pull that together so that everybody, even though what they said may not be used, they feel like they were a part of that process and being brought into that discussion, they're bought into it, and they are going to go full steam ahead because they feel like they're being respected.
Sure. And I think buy-in is so big in in creating a team, I remember when I was a kid and you saw that cartoon where you were told to go stand in the corner or whatever, and the kid's like, I may be standing on the outside, but I'm sitting on the inside. That thought of where you're not buying into that is definitely something that can damage a team. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to just you have a new book coming out this month in February, so I want to kind of walk through that before we land. So we'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm honored to be hanging out with John Taylor McEntire, founder and chief empowerment officer at Mutual Prosperity LLC. So, your book, released in February, it's called The Keys to Authenticity: Unlocking the Code to a Fulfilling Life. There's like, oh my gosh, there's a lot there. Authenticity, fulfillment, there's a ton there. So, in the few minutes that we have left today, John, kind of walk us through what your book meant for you and a couple of pieces that we can walk away with today with that.
Okay, so I apologize, Dave. So the book that on authenticity that actually came out last year in
Oh,
July.
okay.
The
Oh, no
book
worries.
the book that I'm working on right now is um, Sync to the Beat of Success.
Okay.
Um, and it's meant to help people so Sync to the Beat of Success: Mastering the International Art of Building Influence.
Okay.
And this is what's coming out in February. So I apologize that I didn't make that
That's
clear
good. No, that
before.
that sounds great. So fill us in on that book because I feel like, whether it's international, I'm sure there's plenty of good tidbits for people within their country as well. So what are a couple takeaways for the listener today?
So that culture is really a key driver for anybody to have success. And that culture is not just, when we're in the United States, just something that comes from the United States. We live in a global world and we have things that come from all over the place. We have people that are joining our teams from India, from Japan, from China, from Europe, and we need to make sure that we're actually gleaning from all those different types of things. So because I've been dealing with startups and the startup world, one of the things that's been really crucial in the way that I try to talk about things is really the idea of innovation and where innovation comes from, and how do you make it so that it's more practical and not so expensive? Because I remember in the dot-com boom and bust, all the money that was spent on getting people to have all these tools and everything really didn't amount to much innovation. In India, they have something called Jugaad, and Jugaad is really utilizing your resources on hand to be more resilient and trying to actually use those things. In Korea, we learn about nunchi. And nunchi, the Koreans are very good about going into a boardroom, going into a party, understanding how they fit in and figuring out how they fit in better. This is the naturalized part of the sync method. Other things in naturalize is really how do you use your intuition to strengthen the activities and to actually make them go to the next degree, and how do you get innovation from your team, having them utilize their intuition. So this cultural aspect is important when it comes to communitize. That's how do you build, because I've been in the Arab world. I learned a lot about the modulus, and that's a man cave. It's a place where people go. Lots of history and tradition is passed by each other and everything. Progress has happened from there. This is where negotiations take place. A lot of negotiations happen to be taking place right now because of the Middle East conflicts that are going on. But that community type thing is important. And then the you yourself. I am a Jack Canfield Success Principles methodology trainer. And so that's the component in regards to, as a leader, how do you become the best leader to guide these people, and what are the tools that you can do for that? So the sync method is talking about experiences that I've had, talking about other activities that have gone on in the world that we hear about, these different companies, what they did that was successful, things that we should avoid, and basically how do you pull those teams together is the whole goal in regards to, syncing your company to success.
Sure. Well, and you brought up a question, and I kind of, as we start to land the plane today, I want to ask this because for somebody listening here, John, you talk about fit, and what if somebody's listening and they don't feel like they fit on their team? Whether it's educationally, whether it's, whatever, there's it could be real, like I'm not part of it because I'm a remote worker, or it could be totally perceived in their mind. But I'm just curious, when you run into somebody that doesn't fit, what's kind of what are a couple things they can do to either see if they do fit, maybe it's a blind spot they have. I'm just curious what you would counsel somebody that doesn't think they fit into their team right now.
So Jim Rohn is a person I really look up to in regards to his teaching about leadership and personal responsibility and such. And I would take what he would say, and that would be, you know, how we create ourselves is really through what we're reading, through what we're learning from the people that we're hanging out with. If you don't feel like you're fitting in a certain place and you're not jiving with them, it's really important that you figure out what does make you blossom, what makes you tick. And you can only do that by actually learning from other people who have gone down these roads before. Don't try and reinvent invent yourself by yourself. Try and figure out what is it that actually makes you want to be the person that you feel like you're supposed to be, the person that you were meant to be. And then once you've figured that out, you can figure out, what type of organization do I want to be in because of those types of qualities that I'm becoming. And therefore the fit actually happens. And this is where the intuition actually needs to come into play. I actually help individuals use intuition to do career development and actually find their ways out. So your question is really apropos. Of course, we've been talking about leaders in companies and everything, but
Hmm.
everybody is an individual, and somehow we need to get to the individual to help them out and help them figure out where they fit in the best.
Sure. Well, and I feel I wrote down the word empowering because what you said, felt really empowering rather than becoming that victim mentality where I'm stuck here, I can't leave, I get treated bad, and there's nothing I can do. and we're not here to encourage everyone to quit their job. So that's not what we're trying to say either. The reality is if you have mortgage and kids and all that, you got to be careful on what you do. I just think there's some intentionality that you can take and become more intentional about your career. And it's very empowering what John just said about, being able to look at it and see, is this what I want? Is this good for me? Is it good for my family? I mean, right now, I think the research showed the average person changes jobs every 3 years now. So, that's really hard on us as leaders and business owners because with that constant churn, even just because of the nature of things, it's hard. So, whenever we find good people, and when my clients find good people, we're like, you got to keep them at all costs. There's like, there's getting to be fewer and fewer of them around, right? And I'm just curious if you've seen kind of that same thing where it's like, man, keep these people at all costs. I'm just
Well,
curious your thoughts on that.
so this is going to get into one of my goals. I feel it's my mission. I taking on the Nemawashi concept. I plan on having at least three Nemawashi centers in the next 5 years. These will be beautiful places, place where you have Japanese pavilions that people will stay at. You'll have, meeting rooms, board rooms, auditorium, all the nice pool and Japanese gardens and everything. And this will be a place where an M&A can take place, as an example. And so what I've seen in my dealing with these startup companies is that you have this core team that came up with this great idea, and 4, 5, 10 years down the road, they're facing a buyout. And the buyout comes from lots of reasons. Sometimes maybe a company's wanting to get rid of competition, but oftentimes they're actually seeing that there's something of value there that's going to add value to their company
Yeah,
in the products and services. But it's also they're wanting that innovation that comes from that new player. But what usually happens is that the after the buyout, there's a big spike in the stock of the larger company, and then a few years down the road, that company is actually valued less than what it was originally. And I
sure,
think what happens is that we have these antibodies within these organizations that start to eat away at this new life that's come in. And so this Nemawashi Center is really to help those organizations really understand, we need to have a new mission, we need to have a new vision that actually includes these things so that people from the big company don't feel threatened by the new, and the people in the old actually get utilized and empowered to do what they need
sure.
to. And then the whole puzzle is much better and stronger and then can go forward. And so that's a goal. And that's not just for companies, but it would be for like school boards and political groups and churches, anybody. But
Sure, sure.
that's where we're planning on going.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, and again, if you don't fit, that's just so disheartening to not feel like you fit, not feel like you understand your place. There's just so many things that go wrong there. So, couple questions before I let you go. So, your tip of the day for somebody listening, John, maybe it's something that we covered, maybe it's something that's just burning on your heart that you haven't had a chance to share yet. So, what would your tip of the day be for somebody listening?
My tip of the day would be that so I am, of course, an American Caucasian, but I'm married to a Japanese citizen.
Okay.
And so my kids are biracial. My wife is an immigrant, and and I would say that that puts me in a little bit different situation than your regular Caucasian. I've seen my kids actually, get teased because their middle name is Japanese, or because they're bringing a bento from their Japanese mother to school for lunch.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
and what I would say is that are the differences that we have culturally, okay, are very important. People's names are important. We shouldn't be belittling anybody, and we should be teaching our children, we should be teaching the community to actually invite these differences in and to actually learn from them rather than shun them and push them aside. So
Sure.
that's something that's been on my mind lately, that with these divides that we have politically and socially, we need to get in the middle. Everybody is more alike than they're unalike. And so
Right.
if we can get everybody to understand that, then we can see the beauty of what they bring to their puzzle piece and how it
Sure.
actually fits in, and how these other cultural aspects coming in are benefiting the whole and making it glisten and shine.
Yeah, that's awesome. You know, that's the thing. There's so many ways that you can faction life off. You can, separate yourself. You can do all these things, and it's neither right nor wrong, I guess. It's just how much I like talking to as many people as I can, learning as much as you can, whether it's a different nationality, a different country, whatever. So I love that. So I appreciate you sharing that, John. For somebody that wants to learn more about mutual prosperity, they want to get a copy of your new book that's coming out, or they want to connect with you. What's the best way for people to do that, John?
So mutualprosperity.com is my website.
Okay,
Uh, to get more information about me, and I post every day on LinkedIn, and so that would be John Taylor McEntire, the full name spelled out, John Taylor McEntire.
perfect. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much. And for anyone listening that wants to learn more about the sync method, that's on the Mutual Prosperity website as well. So there's a ton of great value there. And just remember as we close that, you know what, if your team's not living up to its full potential, if you feel like your team is in that 86 to 87% looking for a job, if you feel like somebody's not fitting in on your team, this is not something that generally goes away by itself. So thinking that you can stick your head in the sand is not probably a smart way. It's probably not a smart way to tell people that, the beatings will continue until morale improves. There's a lot of things out there that didn't work. So I'm just encouraging you today. John's encouraging you today. You know what? Reach out to John, reach out to me. If you're struggling with something on your team, you know what? It's on you because you've heard there's some alternatives. You've heard there's some different opportunities. So again, rather than jump into your next podcast or jump into your next activity, whatever you're doing, just take a minute and think about your team and how you can improve their experience and how you can build and strengthen that team. And if you struggle with it still, again, if you're at a spot where you need John, reach out to him, go to mutualprosperity.com and he'll be able to help. So again, John, thank you so much for hanging out with us today and talking through some pretty cool stuff. And again, I'm looking forward to your new book. So hopefully it's out in February and we'll grab a copy. And again, thanks for all you're doing in this space.
Well, thank you, Dave, for such a great venue. And I've watched your other shows and everything, and you're just like you said, you like to learn things from lots of different people, and it's that's what makes the world tick is seeing how everybody can actually add value. So thanks again.
Absolutely. So for the listener, again, please do what John just said, add value to somebody else. If you learn nothing else from today, go add value to one person on your team and watch them add value to somebody else. And before you know it, your culture starts to change and people start to care about their job. And when they care about their job, they care about their customer, and it just goes and pays itself forward so many times. So thanks, John. We'll talk soon.
Great, thank you.